It has been suggested, and I believe we might agree with this, might kind of expedite time, that we have a report of at least the first two reports, and then we take a break and have a bite, and then from there go on to the other part of the business. Okay? No objection, we'll proceed in that manner. Unfortunately, I'm listed, your chairman's listed here first. I don't know. And I've been all morning trying to get myself together on this. Everyone have a copy of the agenda? I have just the one in front of me. I suppose before I make my report, that I should ask whether everyone received a copy of the minutes in the last meeting. If not, we'll have Ms. Lewis briefly run down. You didn't get a copy. Okay, everyone else got a copy. Ms. Marsh didn't get a copy. Ms. Marsh didn't get a copy. Well, in order to save time, I don't want to ask Ms. Lewis to read them, since I gather that most of you, everyone just except Ms. Marsh, got a copy. And if there are no questions on the minutes, I'll ask someone if want to. Can we accept the minutes as moved and second? Any question? No question. All those in favor of the minutes as recorded? The usual. Aye. Aye. Those opposed? Ms. Carol Marsh, we will see that you have a copy of the minutes of the last meeting. On the 25th of April, your chairman attended the meeting of the American Association of Museums Trustees Committee meeting, which met at the kind invitation of Senator Pell in the Capitol building on Capitol Hill. This was quite an inspiring meeting for me. I learned a great deal about how museums operate, in spite of the fact that it was considerably extreme there to me, because these were people from the affluent museums around the country, you know, such as the Museum Boston and New York Modern Art Museum, Houston, Texas, and Minneapolis. And these people were talking in terms of millions, and we talk here about thousands, and this was a little astounding. Nevertheless, there were some very creative and very contributory suggestions in terms of board operations, in terms of how you choose chairman to conduct a campaign for you, in terms of finance, which most of us have had rather limited experience. And so I thought this was a kind of a very rich contribution, and I could go into detail with that, particularly with these committees that might be related to campaign fundraising, and also the constituting of boards, and how you use strategy and choosing chairman from the community to head up your campaign for capital funds and other types of funds. Senator Bennett from Utah, who's Republican on this committee, that's attempting to get through a special bill having to do with granting certain incentives for those who contribute or those who want to donate to museums in terms of outstanding artworks that cost up to $1 million. And there are a lot of technical things there involved in the taxes, for which credit is given to those people who donate to museums. There are various artworks and crafts or what have you. There was a tax bill, I understand, that passed in 1969, which involved some concessions, but there was some sort of hang-ups there in terms of how much do you grant a person who makes a donation. For instance, in the present bill, which is the Museum Service Act, there's a question there in terms of whether the person who donates something to the museum and whether the museum sells that particular art piece, say a year later, will that person then be granted the credit that he was originally given? Well, these are legal technicalities, but very important for us to be knowledgeable about, because if someone offers something, they want to know what they're going to get out of it in terms of tax kind of credit. The chairman of that meeting also pointed out that the foundations, particularly the private foundations, are pretty hard hit now economically. So it means if you go to a private foundation, you'll know you should know in advance that they're pushed pretty hard, and they're seeking other ways of getting benefits out of whatever contributions they make to museums in terms of their contribution, what they're going to get out of it. Commissioner Sidney Marlin, I guess his Assistant Secretary, Sidney Marlin with HEW, was one of the participants at the meeting, and he shared with us the fact that there is a bill now pending, and it's the President's administration's bill, which will allow up to, I think it's $65 million for the first year. But the interesting thing about this particular administration's bill is that it would also allow HEW to participate in museum contributions in terms of allowance for youngsters, and a provision that youngsters be admitted to Kennedy Center free of charge in any of the events that take place there. This would become part of the bill. This has not been settled, but it's up for concern. And the other part is that the bill, the Museum Service Act, there are 4 provisions. One that allows for 100% funding, one 75%, another one, which a third one 50%, in terms of federal contribution to the overall federal funds that be available. Houston, Texas, the head of that particular museum pointed out to us that they had raised over $16 million, and only 10% of their funds come from the local government. Minneapolis has raised $26 million. Most of these funds are private, and most of the museums, the interesting thing that their feeling is that they prefer to have private funds as much as possible as opposed to government funds, because I guess we feel that here there's a great deal more freedom in terms of what you can do if you're not committed to the federal government. Although the state of New York, State Council of Arts and Museum has a present budget of $15 million, because you know most of that is from the state of New York. The interesting thing about the Cultural Council of New York is that they have on the side a foundation which is allowed to accept money, and this is the kind of position I'm sure that our board would want to be in spite of this, the fact that we get money from the Smithsonian, but we're able to raise our own money. Which brought a point in my mind is that this board will certainly very soon have to set up a frame of reference in which we can begin doing some very independent things in terms of raising funds. And I'm a strong believer that the community should have a very strong part in lifting its own self, not by its bootstraps, but by its own work, you know, in terms of contributions. And one of the interesting things that I received in terms of suggestion from the commission, this director of the Houston Museum, was that the chairman in the fundraising campaign should not necessarily come from the board itself, but should come from someone from outside in the community who has a special kind of charisma and the kind of dedication and interest in the kinds of things that you're doing, which I thought was very important. And that you're not going to move in a campaign or any kind of undertaking unless you really involve people who really have a real personal interest in what you're doing. And this just doesn't happen by luck, but that there's a need for very important strategy development in terms of how you go about getting people involved in campaign fundraising. This we have had, I think, very limited experience with. It was about 3-4 years ago, but we haven't had any since then. But I think as a great part of our own obligation is that we know that we got a hard road ahead and a lot of work to do, but a great deal of pride and a sense of achievement to come out of this once we get it. And we're going to have a committee. We'll have to have a committee to develop this kind of undertaking. And I think we can have great comfort in the fact that we certainly don't have to do this by ourselves, but that we will be the engineers or the initiators, and that I'm sure that people in the community all over Washington and Anacostia who will join us in this. We've already built up a sense here of pride in what we already have, and though it's in a very small way, there's a great deal of pride expressed and emitted out of this. I don't know if any of you all saw this Anacostia, what a neighborhood movement has done. It was in Star last Sunday. I didn't want to digress, but before I finish my report here on this, is that Senator Bennett feels that this bill that will allow for a tax incentive for donations should be before the Senate and pretty well on its way by the end of the year. That is the status of this Museum Service Act in Congress now. And there are two committees, one for the Senate and one for Congress side. So they also indicated that when this comes up, everybody interested in museum undertakings and missions should give support to it through the congressman writing letters. The other thing is that the man from New York Council indicated very strongly that it's very important that the process of communication be an ongoing thing, that it be all year round affair. And I think this ties in with our interest in the strong development of our Public Affairs Committee, that any communication that takes place is not just a one-shot deal, but it's an all year round thing, so the community really gets a real feel, a real understanding of what you're really doing. It shouldn't be a secret. And that our financial reports also should be, whatever finances we have that we collect or whatever funds we get, the community should be informed and should have a very good understanding. So, you know, if you're affluent, they know it, they'll certainly know it, but if you're poor, they ought to know it, and we're poor. I want to just, if I may, just for a couple of minutes, because we had just a little input on this STAR report that was done on Anacostia Museum. And I don't know how many of you got a chance to read it. Just by chance, I was talking to somebody at the Washington Post, and I was surprised. This person told me, said, you know, the STAR wrote a report on your museum. I said, oh, did they? I didn't know about it, because I don't take the STAR. Occasionally I buy a copy. And the Post is my favorite if I'm a little biased, but they say that you need to know the other side too. So this person, the Post, happened to tell me that the STAR had written us up. So I went down and got a copy of that report, and as those of you who've seen it, it's very comprehensive. It includes much of what was in the annual celebration report. I think some of us got a chance to see the draft before this was done. We thought it was going to come out in June, but it came out in May. That's where the newspapers operate, I guess. Sometimes they have to do it when they have to do it. I don't know if you read it. If you read it, you may have some reservations, or you might. I would be interested to know how you feel. I guess the Public Affairs Committee should have a chance to go through this. And the chairman here from the Public Affairs. Oh, well, that committee, I think, ought to look at this. I think we had a kind of understanding that they were going to include something about the board in that report, but I don't see anything in it now. I could have missed it. And I think this is a kind of affront to us as a board, not either by default or because of what we let happen. I think it's a very, as I said, comprehensive. It's somewhat analytical. It's rather certainly picturesque, and it gives due credit to the staff, of which I'm very happy. I'm sure you are. But the board was left out, at least in a specific. In a very general way, the article says that the community had strong leadership, but there's no demonstration of that leadership in this article. I say that I'm very happy that we have this kind of public exposure, which is good for us as a museum and for the community. But I think the board members have worked very hard in a cooperative fashion in helping get the museum on its way, and still continue to maintain that interest and work, and going to work hard, I'm sure. But this kind of reporting, I don't know what the motive was behind it. Maybe we didn't play an aggressive enough part in, we didn't have no public affairs, we didn't have no public relations kind of structure. So it was left to the staff to carry the weight, and they did a good job. But I think that this kind of thing that reflects not what the community people, leadership is doing specifically, leaves an unfair burden on the staff. You know, if you know anything about public affairs and community organization, it's a twin kind of thing. It isn't a single thing. So I think this, to me, while I say it's all right and it's good, it only shows us that we as a board are kind of asleep, at least in this area. And it may reflect some other things we aren't doing that we ought to be doing. But I hope that the Public Affairs Committee and those other committees will certainly bear in mind that, in my opinion, and I could be wrong, that this kind of reflects something of what we aren't doing as a board in terms of making ourselves felt with the staff, you know. Okay, that's all I have to say. But I would like for the Public Affairs Committee to take a look at this and analyze it in terms of strategy and the kinds of things that have to be done.
I don't have a copy of the agenda. I know you have public statement on there. We now have a 2-hour down the line or so.
Yeah,
Since
you'll be
you've
coming
spoken
in
about
there.
this,
Yeah.
could we sort of move it forward to this point?
Now, I think the agenda calls Mr. Stanley Anderson next, his report.
Sir?
Yes, Stanley Anderson.
I was asked to attend a conference at the Ford Foundation, but just to tie into what the chairman just reported on, I thought that was a very excellent article, and I think sometimes it's better that some things aren't said. But I think when it talked about leadership, it talked about the community leadership, and I think that's what's important. And it did credit the community in its role, and I think that's what the board is part of the community. So I think it was a real positive thing there as well. Now I don't really know how to report on this conference because and we got tape there. Because it was supposed to be a confidential conference, and raise the question that comes up here that the chairman just presented. Why was I selected? You know, and that was the concern of the Ford Foundation when they set up this conference, asking folk who have been connected with various museums to come to New York and participate in a 1.5-day workshop to think in terms of where we've been, where we're going in art. And W. McNeil Lowry, who appeared in a magazine article not too long ago here in the district, said that he wanted to be confidential because the question would be raised immediately. Why were the people from the Art Institute of Chicago brought there? Why was the director of Guggenheim? Why was the Walters Museum, the Cleveland Museum of Art? They did have a broad selection of people, and then they had the Anacostia Neigborhood Museum, of course. But the workshop was a very valuable one because we went there with the idea, after sitting down with the staff here, in particular the director and Mrs. Marsh, who served as consultant from the inception of this whole concept here. And we went and we asked certain kinds of questions. One of the questions that we wanted to raise with the whole museum field and the art field on definition. You know, what is a museum? What is a museum about? A museum is supposed to be more than just collection, more than just tax shelter, but should be a place where you can come and stretch your mind and get your spirit lifted, and where people can get together. And I think this is what the Anacostia Museum is really all about. The folks there, for the most part, had huge collections. You know, we don't have a collection, but we do have a place where people can come. So one of the things that we put on the agenda in opening was that a definition be developed and be looked at as far as what a museum is. The other is we raised the question of while they are collecting, they're making decisions on what's going to happen 100 years from now, because what you collect determines what you're going to present to the people for the future. So it's important that certain constituencies and a new constituency be considered in the collection. I think John always used a typical example of what they did with Benjamin Banneker down at the Smithsonian. Has Benjamin Banneker, had him sitting down on a log, stereotype, watching L'Enfant, who ran off and left the plan to be completed by Benjamin Banneker. Or the tearing down of the slave quarters at Mount Vernon, which said that was embarrassing to the black people. You see, these are the kinds of things that have been left out of history. And I know Mrs. Hutchinson has been doing a lot on this, but this was another question we asked. The other question we raised was the role of minorities in the whole art and museum field, and training, in the area of training, and developing training opportunities in the curative area as well. And we were saying that these are the kinds of things that Ford should be addressing itself to in the future. Many of these concepts, these things I was saying, sort of fell on deaf ears because Anacostia Neigborhood Museum, what is this all about? What is this man talking about here? So the next day they were shaking their heads, because they were interested in money and Ford coming up and helping them with their budgets. And they were interested also in the concept that Chicago had moved toward, where they are now hiring administrators rather than artists, because they're interested in management. You know, there's a lot of money, a lot of things, there's personnel and everything, and these artists are not managing the way that some of the board of trustees feel they should be managing. So that whole concept. The other thing was, how do we reach out? Was another thing that they were interested in, into the community and still have our paintings safe, secure, and all that kind of thing. The other was reaching out from the standpoint of becoming involved in television. They were talking about advertising, like to do with sports on television. And our suggestion was, rather than do that, why not develop a concept similar to what we have here in Anacostia and reach out to the people and the constituency, because their museums are still located downtown, and their clients, the elites that they want to relate to, are now in the suburbs. Now, so they've got to develop programs that relate to the new constituency. And this is what, in the summary, came out what Ford was saying. I think I just want to sort of throw out some of the kinds of things that was discussed there. We were there for a day and a half, and in a sense the ears weren't too open the first day. The next morning, they gave us about 25 to 30 minutes just to talk about the Anacostia Neigborhood Museum and what it has been about during the last 5 years, and try to stimulate and whet some of the elitish appetites which were there. As I said, they came from all parts, the Walters Museum, they came from the Yale University, they came from Dallas, they came from the Museum of Fine Arts of Boston. And in Boston, they said all the decisions were made at the tennis club, you know. You know, there isn't any need to involve the community. What do you get from young people? They said, because they're basically interested in education. So they're educating the young, and they weren't so interested in young people coming and being part of an advisory group or a trustee group, because they're interested in the bigger things. But I was sort of like, can't say a black sheep in the family. I can't say, that's right, though. You know, I was in, you know, this huge board foundation and all these trustees from these huge places. But I think after the day and a half, and I think what we did accomplish, and Junius, what's Junius's last name? Huh? Junius Eddie sent his regards to you, and he said, John, that I almost distinguished myself. And I want to thank Carl and John both for getting me ready. You know, they gave me 2 days of intense concentration to get my mind set so that I wouldn't go up there with my own agenda, but to be prepared to deal with these university folk, you know, the folk who come out of the ivory tower. They were, you know, we had one or two who did, you know, could talk with us and what we were doing. And there were one or two other museums. There was a lady there from, she was another minority. There were two women. And, you know, all these giant corporate people as well as directors, they didn't want to hear the women either, you know. And it was very, very interesting. And I think Ford should be commended for bringing these folks together. I was trying to get that lady's name who was there, but she's from a very small museum. And I think it's important that we relate her. Yeah, Mrs. Johnson, the Museum of American Folk Art. I wasn't sure exactly, but they're doing some creative things in the neighborhood. So with that, I think I would just sort of stop. But basically, unless there's some questions, but that sort of gives me my report. It was April 6th and 7th, my dates.
Thank you very much, Stan. I'd just like to add a note to that footnote, Stan, that I think it's a man from the Modern Museum that is in Boston, threw out that there's a great likelihood that mothers will be leaving their children in the museum as a kind of a daycare outlet, you know. And they will be expecting more than just custodial care. And, you know, this kind of throws a hint out for the Anacostia Museum, that they will be expecting their children to get something while in the museum, you know, not just custodial care. But that's well, with this, we think we'll take a break and have a bite to give us a lift, and then we'll come back to the other reports and the rest of the business. we'd like to move around and get some food, or is the food gonna move to us?
I think you have to move to it.
Oh, okay.
Serve you sodas. This time, the young people are going to serve you sodas. There's some coffee for free, but how much of the sodas are? 15 cents for the Youth Advisory Committee's travel fund.
And they have a dinner tomorrow, aren't
They're having the dinner tomorrow.
Yeah.
Zora, you and Richard will make announcements about that before they leave.
they? Richie, you wanna make an announcement about your dinner tomorrow? That's enough. What's the price, Richard? $1.50. Very good. Okay, we can move.
Snacks free, coffee free, soda 15 cents.
What their duties should be, what areas of expertise they ought to represent, and very, very carefully and thoughtfully who they should be. Now, it seemed to me that since we would want the broadest possible representation, we thought that there ought to be one member on it from the Smithsonian's Board of Regents, which is the governing body of the whole Smithsonian Institution. And Mr. Ripley suggested that we ask a gentleman by the name of Dr. Carol Haskins if he would serve. He's a member of the Regents, and he's a very distinguished scientist, and he has been interested in the Neighborhood Museum from the very beginning and has been helpful to us. And then for the rest of the members, we've been trying to identify the areas of interest that are important to have. And I'd like to read to you the areas that we've got written down so far, with the thought that you would all have suggestions as to areas that we might be neglecting or missing. Because before leaping forward and inviting particular people, we want to be sure that we've got all the different important areas covered. And one area that I've been very concerned about is science. And so this was the reason for asking this Dr. Haskins. Now, if there are particular aspects of science that people are concerned about, we ought to put that down. One area was science, one area was history, another area was social anthropology with a focus on urban problems. Another area is design and the development of exhibits, with particular thought towards people who might be helpful in the future with the exhibits laboratory. And another area was music. Now then, if there are areas that people want to mention, I'd really like very much to write them down. And any guidelines that people want to mention. Mr. Jones suggested that we have people on the on this particular advisory committee for a limited period of time so that they don't feel they're signing themselves up for life. And at the same time, so we're not saddling the Neighborhood Museum with them for life, but that it gives an opportunity for fresh ideas, change, public relations in other areas and outside of the community, opening up new pathways for funds, for private money, things like that. So that that's as far as we've gone. I'll be meeting with Mr. Jones next week. Anybody who has ideas and suggestions and cautions, we want to hear about them so that we go along on this with caution and wisdom.
Thank you very much.
Is it permissible for staff to speak? I just want to raise one question in the area of history. That I think we would be looking for a person with a knowledge of American history, yes, but with a sensitivity to Afro-American history, and particularly to someone who's conversant with history in the area of Civil War history, pre-Civil War history, and Reconstruction, because those would be our main areas of concern.
Would you have time for me to sit with you in a little bit so you could make more details and maybe even suggest some people who you think you would like to see on this group? Okay, great. Any other?
Otherwise,
I don't know whether this would be included on some of the categories you have there. I think what concerned me would be folk culture, folk art, and I know there are lots of people out here in Anacostia who creating some traditions and still have the techniques and the expertise of it.
you suggested, Rev. Lewis, that there may be someone from Anacostia that could.
No, I'm just saying that she was asking about these
Yeah.
categories.
Oh.
An area of my concern.
Good point, yeah.
Any other questions, comments, or suggestions? I might suggest to those of you who have not had a chance to really think about, because you have not known the area that Ms. Marsh has included in the criteria, that you might want to call her later on in her office, maybe in the next few days, and give her any suggestions you may have. Because there's nothing like having a chance to kind of absorb and deliberate what is in front of you. And we realize that this is the first presentation, so you might not have a chance to really, at this time, respond as adequately as you would think you'd like to. So call Ms. Marsh. She's at the Smithsonian Museum. You can get her telephone number from her later, or she can give it to you now.
Yes, well, you can reach me at 381-6484.
Or call this museum office if you lose the number. You can always reach Ms. Marsh through John's office. The secretary can give you the number. Thank you very much. Our next report, I believe, comes from Joe Fenrick, that will be presented by Mr. Percy Battle in Joe's absence. Joe Fenrick is our chairman of the Public Affairs Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, like I said, as I said at the meeting that we had, I got the impression that most of us there have not really been involved in public affairs. So some of the things that we may say that we need to do or we want to do may not be correctly, and some we may have left out that I hope that you all may know a little bit more to help us out a little bit. The article you mentioned earlier, Mr. Chairman, is one of the things that we did talk about a lot, except that we felt that instead of getting local or just local publication or whatnot, even if this is a Washington paper, New York paper, or Chicago paper, it's still local. We thought about national, perhaps international, in some of the magazines like Time and Johnson Publication Network, and things of that nature would be one of the areas that we can publicize, the things that it has done and the things that it could do. In that, we've been in touch with former photographer Johnson Publication as to how we go about having evidence. They would come in here and take some pictures of evidence. Sometimes we do 8-10-page spreads on different things. And the information that we've gotten was to put a package together about the museum. It was two different things. One was right to the office in Chicago. The other, there's an office right down on Pennsylvania Avenue, 1750 Pennsylvania Avenue. And there's a young lady who's formerly resident of the community, Ms. Ms. Grant, I think stands
Fanny Grant.
Grant,
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
on the staff there,
Yeah.
who, you know, would be willing to help us with this, and we thought that was a very good way. We also didn't feel of one-shot thing. You mentioned that too. We talked about year-round, but in order to do that, we need to know what exhibits are coming and when, timetables, you know, so we can start publicizing those things. For instance, I think the next one is the African Arts exhibit. Is that correct?
Yeah.
African Arts exhibit is this kind of thing. Then we can start publicizing that. We talked about someone, maybe staff or chairman or someone else, going on some of the daytime talk TV programs. When I say daytime, I don't just mean during the 5 days a week, like Sunday. There's an apartment 410, C410 or something like that. Those kinds of programs. Because noon on Sunday, I would imagine quite a few people are watching TV, and of course a lot are watching during the week. And we thought that too may be a good area that we ought to cover. The three things, major things that we were talking about was the African Arts exhibit, consumer exhibit when that was coming up, and the fall gala. I think John mentioned that in September, the 6th anniversary, and we'd like to have some kind of program, so we started publicizing that and letting people know about that. With the fall gala, nobody said do this, but I think we mentioned that maybe we want to have a stand-up type of social affair. I don't know what kind, but the Panorama Room is available on Sunday, September 23. If you want to write that down, somebody wants to look into it. It's available in the afternoon. Those are the main things that we had. Basically, what we really need to know, we need dates as to when these things will begin, these exhibits will begin, and what they will be. So that, and then we would take it, from there. I don't know, we may have left some areas out. But,
Any questions?
Yeah.
I'd like to add something also in what we were talking about was,
Can you raise your volume, Mr. Ball? We're trying to get some of this recorded.
one of the items we did talk about is the Public Affairs Committee building toward the September Gala. So as the first thing that we're publicizing about the museum and getting people knowledgeable of what we're doing, it still points to the September Gala, which will focus and constantly build up to this one end product, as I call it, the September Gala, the 6th anniversary.
Yes, sir.
But I just asked, what was the distribution of the 5-year annual report, which I thought was such an excellent job? Did that get around to press people much?
Yes, very much so.
It did.
Absolutely. Tremendous mass mailing, foundations, newspapers, basically those who've written about us in the past.
Come as a result of that.
Right. There have been a number of, as a matter of fact, we had 20,000 of them produced. Not too many left. So it was a wide distribution, press included.
Sometimes if you're gonna, if you have an idea, you don't know, go down there yourself with this thing in your hand and have it in your hand with the person that you're proposal or whatever advantage you want to cover it. Once the thing gets mailed in, they probably never find it again. So I think it's one of the keys to use as an introduction.
Mr. Ballard, there's another thing we're concerned about too. I think that you'd be interested in, and we ought to be pushing through the Public Affairs Committee. And that one, I don't know if it was mentioned by Joe, that we're interested in getting a newsletter of some type as a part of a tool.
I mentioned that last meeting here.
Yeah. The other thing is that the building's going up, the exhibit's design,
And
that
Erie
you ought to be in on
Bruce
too.
Place.
Yeah, working with John and staff on development in that area, to get focus to the community. I guess John will be talking to us about that. Yeah. Okay, any questions, Mr. Battle, in regards to where his committee is? He's given us a progress report, and a very good one. And from what I hear, there's a lot of hard work being done there, and they have some very exciting plans.
Yeah, I have a question. I wonder, does the Public Affairs Committee have a mailing list that's available for publicity purposes? And And if so, maybe it might be helpful if board members could see the mailing list, and perhaps we would want to add some additional names to that list.
You need a mailing list of the Public Affairs Committee
No,
itself?
a mailing list to whom you send memos
Right.
and
No, we do not.
announcements.
No, we would use the same mailing list that's already available.
We have a mailing list, I guess it must be about 5,000 names on it.
I'd like to see.
And it comes from people who make contributions to the museum. It comes from people who just said, put me on your mailing list. That's basically the way we've gotten it together. And we have the list. We do business with A, B, and W, the mailing people. And they have, every time we get some new names, we just send it in. And whenever we mail out something, basically invitations, we just tell them run the whole mailing list. If it's a small mailing, we do it ourselves because it costs to do it.
Are there any further questions? Keep in mind
Can I
that
suggest something,
yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
That if you have any names that you'd like to put on the mailing list, we'll get those names together and have A, B, and W see if it's already there. And they'll reject it, you see, if it's already there. But if you have any names of friends, or I don't care who, we'd be happy to put it on the mailing list. Another thing that we've done is that after the last executive committee meeting, we put all of your names on the Smithsonian mailing list so that they would be mailing you invitations to openings and events at the Smithsonian.
I received my first one this morning.
I may have to come out there. Very good. I might make a note here that Mr. Fenwick and Mr. Battle and Mr. Ball's Public Affairs Committee, we're very appreciative of the fact, because this is something we've been toying with for the past year. And it seems like we never got any real steam off the ground for one reason or another. And I know that you can share me in the elation that I take in the fact that they've really gotten off the ground and doing some work. I also might mention, not in defense of them, that they're just getting started. And I'm sure that they will want a lot of assistance from you and all the intake that they can get from everybody, because this is a big, big undertaking. If there are no further questions, we'll go to our next report. I believe it's given by Mrs. Lillian Smallwood, the educational chairman.
The Exhibits Education and Research Committee met
I'm sorry.
on Saturday, May the 12th. We had reports from the staff on the upcoming exhibits, and slides were shown on the history of Anacostia project. From this meeting, we have certain recommendations to make to the board for your consideration. That the Anacostia Neigborhood Museum develop and publish a calendar for sale. If you approve this project, all details must be complete and ready by September. It would be, the sale of these calendars could bear the expense of the publishing of the calendars. There's a lot of detailed work to be done to get to that point, but well, it's just brought to the group for, as a recommendation for the board to vote on. That this board inquire of the Council of Governments the possibility of a minibus to start and stop at this museum. Now, I don't know all the details behind this minibus, but Teresa Jones brought this up to us at the committee meeting, and if there's more information to be filled in for the members of the board, I'd like for someone who's knowledgeable about it to fill them in on this. I understand there's some kind of bus that's going to be traveling through this area, and it was her suggestion it would help publicize the museum, and it would also bring people into the museum if this bus started here at this point and stopped here. So we want the board to take some action on this today if possible. And on each of these recommendations, because I think time is a very important element in the things that we discussed. Another recommendation was that a time limit be established for the life of an exhibit. But prior to this time limit, there was a feeling that sometimes an exhibit stayed much beyond its interest. That is, it wasn't drawing in more people. Those people who were gonna come into the museum and see it, that exhibit has been through here. It will have all been through. Now, this time, of course, has to be coordinated with the staff. And we said that, we decided that prior to this time limit being established, that there be a report from the exhibit staff on the feasibility of the schedule that would be set out. We want to recommend to this board that the board take action to restore the original name to the Burney School. This building is being considered as a landmark in Anacostia. And if it's going to be a landmark, then we feel very strongly that the original name of the school should be reestablished and put on the school. And we want the board to take some action to have the sign on the Frederick Douglass Bridge enlarged. That may not sound like it comes from this particular committee or within the realms of this committee, but we discussed it and we felt strongly about it, and we wanted to bring it to the board for some action. That the sign on the Frederick Douglass Bridge is not large enough to be seen. Many people don't even know it's there. We'd like to have some action or something from this, some action from this board to see that something's done about that. I think that's all right.
This is a small one. One other item I think that we talked about, that was the sign on the bridge coming over that points Nichols Avenue, that should be changed.
That's right. Yes. The changing of to change the name of that bridge.
Well,
So
you
you
say big on that sign on it.
oh,
It says Nichols
read
Avenue.
Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue instead of
Get the highway department over where
Yes.
it's responsible to put the right name up there.
That's two groups have
That's
already
right.
written letters about that.
In conjunction with one of the items that Mrs. Small was just mentioning, the name, enlarging the sign on the Frederick Douglass Bridge, we also wanted to bring it to the attention of the city government that they had in error named the wrong bridge, the Frederick Douglass Bridge, and that we historically should be the 11th Street Bridge. And that is the bridge that Douglas crossed.
Any discussion we have in this? Mrs. Small, would you?
and it's now being referred to as Nichols Avenue School.
May I say something
Let
to
me,
that?
which one? Which one speak to
The small one.
Nichols Avenue School.
Yeah.
To Nichols Avenue School, to Ms. Smallwood,
Yes.
if they just merely remove that wooden sign up that says Nichols Avenue School, you'll find James G. Burney built in and etched in stone right behind it.
That's all we need to do is take some action to have that.
Yeah,
that
just the wooden sign removed.
No, but you have to take more action than that, because if you have two Burney schools, you have to change the name of the other school. Or
I
some
can
other
see-
kind of nomenclature. Because
I can see.
No, I'm saying,
I understand,
it's gonna take some action.
That's because the one that we're referring to is Burning School number 2.
They can call the other school Brown Farm Elementary School.
Mrs. Small, could you go back and give us the first one first, and then we follow in order?
Okay.
And whether it's appropriate for the board to take action on either, any, or all of those steps that you
Could I
mentioned.
make a
Yeah.
recommendation, a suggestion?
Stan, go ahead.
Why don't we, since we want the name taken, Nichols Avenue taken off, but it doesn't exist anymore in the minds of all of us. And then just take that name, Nichols Avenue, since it's now Martin Luther King, and just make that school up there Martin Luther King School. Gotta solve it and have some logic around it.
Which one, Stan?
Just
The new Birdie.
Just
The
take
new
New
Birdie,
Birdie,
the new Birdie.
and just call it Martin Luther King, and after the street, and then just take that Nichols Avenue sign down, and Birdie becomes Birdie automatically.
G. Burney.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well-
I think we want to make that recommendation.
Renaming the Burning number 3 Martin Luther King, there is a recommendation in Granville Wilson's office now, resulting from a meeting at Rehoboth Baptist Church that one of the new schools, so there may need to be some conversation about another appropriate name, because that has been proposed for one of the new schools.
I didn't hear what you said, Mrs. Smith.
In response to the suggestion, I was saying that out of a meeting which was held at Rehoboth Baptist Church, the name Martin Luther King Jr. has already been proposed for one of the new schools to be named. So we may want to consider another name.
Well, one of the things, I think
Mrs. Lewis.
I think we need a little bit more clarification about the minibus idea. John, do you know anything about it? Does anybody?
I would suggest that the committee hold a meeting with the transportation director at Lamont, the Metro, and in turn present your proposal, and then see they're in the process now of looking at routes, and then you could come up with some kind of suggestion of how the bus would be routed. Let's see, call General Grant, Jackson Grant, and got a meeting with him and his transportation man.
And Teresa said something about the COG and having some money on a special fund.
That's the dial. That's the one she wants to refer to. The dial bus.
Yeah.
That's going to be developed there too. That's going to come out.
Yeah.
Okay.
The next one.
Now, the first one was about the calendar, and it probably may want to be some discussion about that. But we'd like for the board to take action, take a vote on it today, so that things can begin to move. They can make the plans for what kind of pictures and all the details of the calendar.
What kind of calendar would this be? I mean,
Well, the main thing was a calendar with pictures of Anacostia, or pictures of museum activities, or maybe even an artwork of some of an Anacostian, someone who, it was something, I just thought it was a good idea. I think we could probably make money from it, not only bear the expense of the publishing, but we may make a few dollars from it.
what would be required of the board, may I ask, in terms of this
So the
project?
board's approval.
That's all?
That's all.
Oh, okay. Well, no funding, we wouldn't require funding. No, I think this is important because I think if the board, approves your idea, I think we ought to have some responsibility for backing you up, financial wise, if that's required, Reverend Lewis?
This is what I was going to find out, how much would it cost, what would have to be the initial outlay of money, and when I think we knew that, what would be the board's responsibility towards the getting the money, financial responsibility towards the project.
John?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we start a process here. It could really be fundraising. That what we could do, staff could do, is set up say 3 different ways it could be done, and price those ways. Say, here's what you're getting into here, here, and here, and you decide. So I think what Mrs. Smallwood is asking, should we start that process, or is there any reason you see why we ought not get into that? But staff could set it up in a number of ways and say, here's what we'd be getting into, as well as some suggested ways of how you distribute them. That's ultimately important also.
Right. Okay, well, as I see it from this little discussion we've had, Carol, you want to speak to it?
Well,
Yeah.
I just started imagining the calendar in my mind. I don't know who's, going to do the work and everything, but I was just thinking about all the fabulous photographs that are taken, particularly Zora Martin's pictures and pictures that other people take. And I was just thinking, if there was a picture for every day, there'd be 365 pictures. It'd really be a chance to see all of these pictures. But I suppose that would be a very expensive kind of a calendar. But nevertheless, the main point that I'd like to make is that there's certainly a lot of wonderful material coming out of the daily work of the museum that would make a fabulous calendar.
I can see it tied in not only what the museum's doing here, but also in terms of what's going on in the community. There's some beautiful sites in the community too. And there's some ugly sites in the community, but but there are all kinds of sites. But the other thing I think at this point, Ms. Hall, this is just my little bit of opinion, that at this point it seems to me you're at the exploratory stage, and the board perhaps could not take formal action right now, but they will certainly give you permission to go ahead and explore this with the staff and whatever costs involved and what you have to do. I think we've expressed unless the board wants to take a vote on it, we think we should take a vote on the project. You are a committee and you designated to do these things, you know.
Okay, then,
So I don't think you need a formal vote from the board for you to pursue this project. As Reverend Lewis said, work out the details, and then if there's any need for us to get.
Let's authorize it. Chairman, I move that we authorize it.
Yeah, authorize it. They go ahead. I second that motion. You think we need a,
because the reason I thought we felt that we should bring it to the board for their approval, is because the staff have got to go through a lot, to lay out these, you know, so they got to know in front, is the board gonna approve this, or we gonna do all this work and get it laid out, and then the board said, well, we don't really think it's worthwhile. So that's why I thought that even the staff that's gonna be working on getting the layout for us and getting the estimate of the cost, felt that the whole board should be knowledgeable about it and the project, and possibly give their approval before they even go to that much work. John, am I correct, or is that just an assumption of mine?
Well, that's basically correct.
I thought so.
The other thing, and more important than that, is that programs and projects that this museum undertakes, that the board begin to take some generating authority to say, this is what we want, start on it, and bring it back to us, and we'll say yay or nay or throw it out, whatever it is.
But it has to be authorized.
Generate it from here.
It's been moved.
okay, move in second. Question? All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Question.
I wonder if the PR committee wouldn't have a large role in this, and they shouldn't be included in the plan.
I think that, this committee see this as an educational way of projecting education. Now, I think there ought to be some association, but I think, you know, linkage, but don't want to cut down interest and the fervor about it. Good idea was there, but, you know,
I think that the Public Affairs Committee is such that Public Relations, that they should be knowledgeable of everything that's going on in the museum. That's part of their function, you know, and their objective, I mean, their mission. And so automatically, as Mrs. Smallwood and her committee develop certain things, they should feed in the progress to the Public Affairs Committee.
Well, I felt it might be the other way also, that some ideas of the Public Affairs Committee might be made a part of the calendar itself. For instance, the calendar could project dates that various organizations meet on during the course of the year. And there are other ways in which they could do a public relations story.
Yeah.
I really like to get some support, financial from organizations, putting their message out.
Yeah, I see what you mean there.
Then
Yeah.
I guess it would be important then that we have coordination. I guess as long as there is coordination between committees.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, so a working, connecting link between Public Affairs and your committee. Okay, we're ready for the vote. Oh, you have a question?
When you say calendar, are you talking about the big front that hangs on the wall, or are you talking about some other variation, like the booklet form, you know, maybe an appointment with which I think is far more useful, and people are more willing to buy than the thing that hangs on the wall. The thing that hangs on the wall would be less work, because it's not, you know, it's only 24 pages. But the other style, you know, I think it's functional.
Cece, would you reiterate this other style again?
You know, appointment book style.
What kind?
Appointment book style. You know,
Like activities,
booklet kind that maybe has, you know, you got a week, you know, a week is going, something like that.
I think that's a good idea, but I think we'd reach a much larger mass of people if we had the hang on the wall style with pictures. But this is what I pictured, because it was, you know, it's my brainchild, my thing, and I feel real strongly about it. I feel like it could really be a big success. Would be that the top half be a picture, you know, of whatever the staff's choosing. you know, they had talked about maybe silk screen. They're talking about it, but they needed the approval of this board to go ahead and begin to do the necessary work to find out what it would cost. And that's what I had in mind. I understand what you're saying. I like what you're saying, but I think we would reach more people and sell many more calendars if it was the wall type, with the picture on the top half and the bottom half with the days of the month, and a different picture for each month. Well,
yeah, the only problem there is there's so many free calendars, you know, it's free on the wall site, so you got a lot of competition. You come to
well,
say you're gonna,
and I feel
here's
like
our calendar mine, and where somebody else is saying, here's our calendar, it's free.
but I feel like with Anacostia being exhibited on those pictures, I feel like we're gonna be able to sell a whole lot of them, you know.
See, you know, we could sell them to Curtis Brothers, for instance, use that as an example, and they'd give them out at Christmas time or sometime just to help us at our fundraise. You know, the potential for a household, you know, you go to some junior league, say, look, we want you to take 150,000 calendars, you know. And, you know, that way, rather than the appointment book, but I think the appointment book is something that could be done. But the calendar thing, potential for households would be great. Foreign visitors are coming, you know, that kind of thing. And then still selling Anacostia, that's all we're doing.
Revelation?
By the way, the Metropolitan Museum of Art does this.
Yeah.
One
Is that right?
picture per month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to have one picture per month, it's only 12 months in a year. Pictures ready.
There is a sample upstairs of something that Bounty Fellows did, and I think he got first 4 or 5 on what he did.
Can we take a vote on this now?
We are, man. So, well, we need a discussion. We've had some good discussion. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
Perhaps we could look at the potentiality of a variation of Ms. Smallwood's idea into the desk calendar thing, number one. Number two, do you think that it would sell better if it were more Anacostia oriented over against museum oriented, business oriented over against church oriented, community organization oriented over historical oriented, historical spots?
Have both. Have
Why couldn't we
combination,
have,
combination of
I
all.
just raised the question.
Yeah.
Of those things, right?
Yeah.
In
Oh,
fact,
sorry.
the more informative you make it, wouldn't it make it that much more unique? In other words, it's something different from the average type of calendar you would see. Also, you're getting your public relations in. I think you're spreading the word of the Anacostia Museum, and I think that in itself would help us sell the name of the idea of what we're trying to do.
I think you need to say to us what kind of formats in your mind, so when we start developing the photography, that we know what we're looking for. And then we come back and bring it to you and say, well, here's some historical sites, and we're pushing history this year, or whatever the case may be.
John, would it be possible for us to try to do a diversified thing? For instance, the Panorama Room, which is now, you know, as far as the city is concerned, it's a landmark there. People come all over the city to participate. Okay, we go to the Panorama Room and we push that from the business point of view, as far as they're concerned. It's something great that the church has done, and they would come in with some kind of thing to have their thing in that calendar, you know. I mean, it's so many ways you can put it together. And then at the same time, 1 month could be dedicated to the history, you know, where we deal with Fred Douglass, Anacostia Neigborhood Museum maybe, what other, you know, other historical things you might have. Then another month we could do something around something, you know, else that you talked about, the churches and the church landmarks, you know, that kind of thing.
But maybe.
I think Ms. Marsh wanted to say